President of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/C's change.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
How can it be fair that millions of people in the world are denied access to clean water? At WaterAid, we need your help to create an equal world. Whether you're from Morden or Madagascar, everyone, everywhere should have access to clean water. Because clean water changes lives. You can help WaterAid change the picture. To find out how, search WaterAid Radio now.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 1061 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene from the studios of Eurasia Group, the offices of Eurasia Group in downtown New York. Thrilled to be here as we consider the top risks 2020 by Ian Bremmer, by Meredith Sumter and their team as well. Cliff Caption, their chairman, involved as well. They lead with the United States as one of their top risks today. That is a very different thing coming into the election of 2020. And, of course, in there they speak of Iran, Iraq, as well, the Middle East and oil. As we've seen this morning, oil again elevated. So we welcome all of you here from Eurasia Group and, of course, Paul Sweeney in our world headquarters at the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. Paul?
Tom, thanks so much. You know, so much has changed over the last 72 hours, and we're at the time of year where we're hearing a lot of economists and forecasters talking about their 2020 outlook. I'm sure a lot of people had to kind of sharpen a pencil over the last several days and kind of think about how they needed to discount raised tensions coming out of the Middle East. Diane Swank, she is the chief economist for Grant Thornton. She joins us on the phone. We always love talking to Diane. Diane, thanks so much for joining us. I wonder if you could just kind of frame for your economic outlook for 2020 how increased tensions, uncertainties coming out of the Mideast may impact your outlook?
Well, the key issues, of course, one, oil prices. And even as we see oil prices rise right now, a sustained oil price increase for the next 6 months or so will not only add volatility to financial markets, but it will take at least 6 months for our own domestic production to ramp up. And that has spillover effects in the global economy. So all of a sudden, a global economy that was looking a little better at the start of the year looks like it could get reduction in growth rates as we see in response to higher oil prices. I think that's something that's important. The other issue that's very hard to assess is cybersecurity threats from Iran. That's something they're very good at, hacking. And the cybersecurity risk is hard to price in. We just don't have a precedent for doing that. And that gets to the last issue, and that is ongoing uncertainty. There will be attacks, we think, on military bases. The Iranians have already said that, and this will not be a one and done. It's already more than one and done. And so we're talking about in a heightened, uncertain environment when CEOs already have shown they've broken from consumers in terms of their optimism for 2020. CEO confidence had continued to deteriorate in the fourth quarter despite signs of a phase one deal with China, and that's something, what does that consumers don't, and why is there that break out there? That was something we were worried about prior to this. This will only put a further wedge in between the optimism of CEOs and that of consumers, although it may take a toll on consumer confidence as well.
Yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to go. And it just seems, the consumer really has been the driving force for this economy for some time, and is expected to be the driving force of the U.S. economy in 2020. Is there any sense from the data that could be at risk at all as you think about 2020?
The only thing that's really important right now is the break between consumers' expectations about the future and the assessment of their current economic conditions. For the moment, they still feel really good about their current economic conditions. In fact, those improved in December, and that's good news. The bad news is their expectations about the future have deteriorated, and we've seen this widening gap between consumers' expectations about the future and the assessment of their current economic conditions. Why do we worry about that? Because that tends to make consumers more skittish. It doesn't take much of a fear factor to get them to pull back. We saw that a little over a year ago. In fact, a year ago during the height of the malaise in financial markets, the Fed and its need to pivot on the tightening of financial conditions, and actually a pullback by the U.S. consumer, which was highly unusual. We usually can always bet on if the consumer looks in their wallets are still okay. They say, okay, I'm going to keep spending. Well, now you have two factors at threat. Not only are they a little skittish, but they also have the real economic impact of higher oil prices. That shouldn't take us down alone, but this unpredictability, this skittishness that we've seen come into the consumer that really was absent in previous expansions is something that we're watching.
Are we debt burdened? I mean, in the bifurcation of business uncertainty and yet a consumer doing pretty well, are we up to our eyeballs in debt, Diane Swank?
Well, businesses are up to their eyeballs in debt, and some businesses are up to their eyeballs more than their eyeballs in debt. Consumers are better situated than they've been in previous expansions. What worries me a little bit is that consumer credit card applications they've pulled back and tightened up on those applications a bit, which means consumers have a little less access to credit. Maybe that's a good thing because it's stopping what could have been a bad cycle in debt. And certainly we don't have the mortgage debt we once did. We have student debt, but that's a different animal. That is investing in education, and that has sort of a different place in the equation. It is clearly having an impact on spending patterns, and one of the silver linings of the lower rate environment we've seen in recent months has been the ability to pull in those millennial buyers that had delayed and deferred, in part because of their student debt, buying homes and moving forward with their lives in ways that other generations did a little younger than they did. So that was encouraging. But in terms of the consumer, that's one of the silver linings, is they don't look overburdened with debt, and they do have more saving. Unfortunately, that saving is not concentrated in the lowest income household where the wages are accelerating. But we do have a better consumer overall balance sheet today than we did entering many recessions.
So, Diane, I want to follow up on Tom's question about the kind of consumer debt. I'm thinking about federal debt, the deficit. When the tax cut of 2017 was pushed through, one of the byproducts was pushing that federal deficit higher. At what point do we begin to worry about the federal deficit?
That's the $1 trillion question, of course, now that we're running $1 trillion deficits. And I still am a deficit hawk at heart, although, would love to see some infrastructure spending that had productivity growth associated with it to raise the equation for the U.S. economy going forward. Doesn't pay for itself, but it is an important issue. If you're going to spend the money, you want to see investment. And unfortunately, we didn't see a lot of investment out of those tax cuts that many had hoped to see out of the tax cuts. I have to admit, I was a little bit not as reassured that we would get them right away, the way they were structured. But nonetheless, less, that is something we really need. That said, what we worry about, and openly we saw at the American Economic Association meetings over the weekend, was, former Chairman Ben Bernanke, former Fed Chair Janet Yellen, Larry Summers, all talking about the concerns that we don't have the fiscal or the monetary policy space to ease as we would need to. And the automatic stabler is not talking about that right now, about what happens to employment insurance in the case of a recession. How do we get those to kick in faster? How do we get them to be more powerful to weather the next recession? That discussion's not even being had right now, despite the fact we seem more than willing to spend with glee at the moment. It's sort of worrisome that we've sort of used some of our ammunition before we actually hit a recession.
And just finally on trade for me, Diane, is this phase one deal January 15th? Is that pretty much all we're going to get? And do you think that's kind of enough for the economy, the economic expectations out there?
It's not enough. It's in fact, mostly what it undoes is the retaliation that already occurred in response to trade wars, and we're on, what could be another trade war and additional tariffs with Europe right now. And what it really doesn't do is lift the veil of uncertainty with regard to tariffs. About 3/4 of all tariffs are still in place with China, even after this preliminary deal, whatever it may be. It looks to be pretty skinny in terms of an actual trade deal with China. And, at this point in time, this is something we really worry about, is not lifting that veil of uncertainty and adding more fog on the outlook. And what does that mean in terms of hesitation and moving forward by businesses?
And now we rip up the script with Diane Swank, as we can do. Diane, I was really taken aback by Chairman Bernanke's comments on the efficacy of negative interest rates at AEA. There's any number of stories. Folks, for those of you who don't know, AEA is where 2,000 people like Diane Swank descend on a given city, all read the Financial Times and get out their slide rules over cocktails. So that sort of sums up the conference. There's a lot going on there, Diane. What did you learn? What did you learn about the negative rate debate at the American Economic Association meetings?
Well, it's interesting because although our Federal Reserve somewhat has said we don't really want to go there now, they did say they were on the table, and now they've kind of backed off a bit and said we don't really want to go to negative rates and avoid them if possible. I think what's interesting is, when you're in a situation like another recession and you're in a crisis and you don't have the fiscal maneuverability you once did, and frankly, we pulled back on that fiscal room in this expansion as well. Remember the sequester, we had fiscal restraint, much like Europe really had fiscal restraint, and the central bankers have been begging about this, and as a result, negative rates get back on the table. All bets are off. And so even though I think negative rates are not the best option, they become one of the only options if you don't have fiscal stimulus and you've run out of other ways to stimulate the economy. Right. In Denmark, they seem to have done okay. In Germany, they're making people save more, go figure. And they haven't had some of the negative impacts that many people thought, but we're talking about very marginal negative rates. In theory, you get around a lot of economists who theorize about this, and in theory, it works really well to go really negative. Remember, the Taylor rule said we should have gone almost 5% negative to clear the economy in the wake of the crisis. Right. But theory is not reality. And, what we worry about is these are very small negative rates, and they say there's not a lot of knockoff effects. We hear mixed views on that. The literature is not completely clear on it, and we just don't know the long-term impact yet.
It's been wonderful. Diane Swank, thank you so much. With Grant Thornton, thrilled that she could be with us this morning, and particularly after the American Economic Association meetings. Of course, our Michael McKee reporting from there through the weekend as well. Paul Sweeney.
Yeah, Tom, let's get world and national headlines right now with Michael Barr. Michael.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Tom. President Trump is back at the White House and threatening a swift and potentially disproportionate response if Iran retaliates. Despite the escalating tension, the president and his aides insist killing General Qasem Soleimani was the right move. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on ABC's This Week.
Intelligence assessment made clear that no action allowing Soleimani to continue his plotting and his planning, his terror campaign, created more risk than taking the action that we took last week.
ABC's This Week can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says his country is on the same page with the U.S. over the airstrike. On Sky News, Raab was asked about comments by Pompeo, who said, Europeans haven't been as helpful as I wish
that they could be in supporting the airstrike.
I understand the position that the Americans found themselves in. I'm sympathetic and also not for a second naive about the role of General Soleimani or the Quds Force or the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and I think I've made that clear. At the same time, we also need to chart a course through these tensions, de-escalate the situation.
President Trump also threatened to target 52 Iranian sites, some of them important to Iran and the Iranian culture. A 5.8 magnitude quake hit Puerto Rico before dawn, unleashing small landslides, causing power outages, and severely cracking some homes. CES, the annual technology show in Las Vegas, officially begins tomorrow, but much of the activity is already underway. News conferences are being held to show off what the big companies have, including Samsung with their super thin 8K TVs. Even Impossible Foods is expected to show off a new vegan meat today. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg Poll.
Michael Barr, thank you so much. Let's get a look at economic indicators that are coming up for the remainder of the week. Today at 9:45, market U.S. services PMIs and the composite PMI as well. Tomorrow we're going to get some factory orders, some durable good orders. They have been the weak part of the U.S. economy. We'll see if there's any stabilization there coming out of industrial America. Then, of course, coming at the end of the week, we have jobless claims. Jobless claims, continuing claims. We'll get a sense of kind of how things are going for the consumer. And that's really the key issues for the market. How is the consumer doing? How is employment, wages, and all that? Economic indicators are brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms.
Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. You know, some in the real estate business aren't too happy with the prospect of a pied-à-terre tax on homeowners who live in New York City just part of the time.
This pied-à-terre tax would tax them annually at an incredible rate, and it would be very egregious, and it would deter people from buying here and owning second and third homes.
Bess Friedman, CEO of real estate firm Brown Harris Stevens, says that kind of tax would hurt the city's economy.
Now, we did a little bit of study of this and looked into it, and roughly there's $1 billion annually generated from pied-à-terre homeowners in New York City. That being said, that means millions of dollars in taxes for the city. That means thousands of jobs for the city.
Any tax of that nature would be on top of a new mansion tax on homes selling for more than $2 million. Some supporters have said taxing high-priced second homes could help balance the budget and pay for subway repairs. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Fulham, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a swimming pool, and our expert team will help you get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Along the goal line, scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, hit a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks extending their losses this morning, oil building on gains as investors continue to grapple with the fallout from a U.S. airstrike that killed a powerful Iranian general. Gold is surging to the highest in more than 6 years. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down about 19 points. Dow futures down 181 and NASDAQ futures down 61. The DAX in Germany is down 1 1/3%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds, yield 1.77%. Yield on the 2-year 1.53%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1.3% or 82 cents at $63.87 a barrel. And COMEX gold is up 1.5% or $22.60 at $15.75 an ounce. The euro 1.1198 against the dollar. British pound 1.3138 and the yen 108.10. Boeing down more than 1% this morning in reports that the company's weighing a move to raise more debt following the grounding of its 737 MAX, and that the jetliner's return to service could face further complications. While Boeing had about $20 billion in available funds at the end of the third quarter, costs stemming from the MAX crisis are increasing, according to the Wall Street Journal. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom.
Karen, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate that. We welcome all of you worldwide and particularly across this nation with the news of the last 3 days. And without question, this is our interview of the morning. He is Henry Rome, and he is far, far too young to be this good. He is out of Princeton, where he had a modest knowledge of the Persian language, and then has gone on to a sterling academic career studying the Levant and Persia. And he joins us today as truly one of the nation's Persian experts. With Eurasia Group, I should point out, we're thrilled that we have the top risks of 2020 for Ian Bremmer's Eurasia Group this morning. Henry, thank you so much for taking time with us. What is the number one thing Americans miss of the present Islamic Republic and its linkage back to a Persia of long ago?
Sure, thanks, Tom. It's great to be here with you. I think the number one thing that Americans miss is the prevalence in today's Iran of the same nationalism that we've seen over the past hundreds of years. That while Iranians today, obviously majority Shia country, but the depth of religion only gets you so far. Really, the nationalism, the pride in the empire is still very strong, and I think the government today uses that very effectively to try to rally around the flag. And then we're seeing it right this morning with funeral processions for Qasem Soleimani.
Whether we read Dexter Filkins or George Packer or the others out in the media, Tom Friedman and others writing in the last number of days, there seems to be a debate about the Islamic Republic. I get the idea of nationhood and everyone coalescing. What does the new Islamic Republic look like? It's not the same one of 1979 or even 1989 after the war, is it?
No, it's not. It shifted in a number of important ways. One is that after the revolution, you've had a much more institutionalized mechanism that have, I think, become or solidified, I should say, the rule of the clerical elite, and also, I think, limited or disabused people of the notions that this would be that this would take a more Republican, a more democratic route. So there's been, I think, an aspect of disappointment, especially among the revolutionary generation. I think also the government's proclivity, the government's willingness to crack down viciously on the population when it feels threatened, I think is a more recent phenomena going back to 2009. Certainly there were protests before, but the events of 2009 combined with the ones over the past few months, I think, have been quite impactful. And I think that the last point I'll make is the kind of intensification of official corruption. You have folks who are ostensibly men of God, but are also involved very significantly in the Iranian business sector, and I think you have a disappointment of expectations among many Iranians. Now, does that mean they want to overthrow the government? No, and I think that's what we're seeing very clearly in Tehran right now.
So, Henry, I guess what a lot of observers are wondering at this point, as we wait for some type of retaliation, is this going to be a series of tits for tats kind of thing, back and forth, relatively low-level engagement, or do we really run the risk of this escalating into some type of war, however limited?
I think it will be more of the former, more of the tit-for-tat exchanges, but there's going to be bloodshed, and it's going to be very turbulent. So I would say that the Iranians will continue to have U.S. forces in their sights. They've said very publicly over the weekend that military retaliation is what they are going to do, and I think once that happens, President Trump will be compelled to respond, and there will be a cycle here. But there is a ceiling to this, and I think the ceiling is reinforced by the structural factors on either side that are pushing the two sides away from the kind of brink of a larger escalation. On the U.S. side, I think Trump remains averse to military conflict. I think recognizes that conducting a major war, essentially, in the middle of an election campaign would be extremely damaging. And I think from the Iranian side, they are very cautious. They're calculated. They do not want to fight a war that they're going to lose. So I think that imposes some constraints on what we're going to be seeing over the next weeks and months.
Henry, just quickly, what is your best estimate of when we could, or when Iran could really make a move here in retaliation?
I think within the next days or weeks. So fairly soon. They're using the Soleimani funeral as a way to generate and consolidate nationalism in the country, and also as a way to buy some time to figure out exactly what to do. But I would say, imminent, essentially.
Henry, thank you so much. We really look forward to your analysis, your synthesis here in the next number of days. Henry Rome is with Eurasia Group, and of course, one of his focal points is the Middle East, and it is a top risk for 2024. Ian Bremmer and Eurasia Group. Paul, I want to go over the raging debate on Apple. Dave Costin, over at Goldman Sachs, out with a cautious view on Apple. We had Dan Ives in the other day saying it's going to go to the moon, etc. Have you ever seen a stock with such division?
It's interesting, Tom. I think, a year ago, there was probably even more bearishness, more division on Apple, because it kind of came down to a relatively simple discussion. Do you believe this company can pivot away from dependence on phones and other hardware stuff to services? Now we've had 2019 was such a good year for Apple 11, the phone, the iPhone 11, as well as the AirPods. So the story is actually better today, I would argue, and I think that's what Dan Ives is arguing. It's better today than it was a year ago. You still have services growing well, but you've also now got a pretty vibrant, phone business and wearables business, and then you've got the 5G super cycle. So, Dan Ives, he's certainly sticking with his bullish call.
Well, does my phone not work if we have 5G?
I think you're going to have to upgrade, Tom, to 5G. When you just got your iPhone 11, fantastic photos you're posting on social media, but you're going to want to go 5G because you're going to want to download Game of Thrones in like 3 seconds.
In 3 seconds. Yeah. I just desperately have to do that. From our studios in New York and from the offices of Eurasia Group in Manhattan, this is Bloomberg.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium,
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats.
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade. Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Haskell gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
You have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
The good news is the economy is strong. The bad news is the economy is strong.
Financial crises take a really long time to recover from.
Finance.
The strong job market's pulling people back in.
You can't have for very long, monetary union without a fiscal union.
Investment.
What we preach is extreme diversification.
It's hard to have sustained productivity without capital investment.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, thank you for being with us coast to coast. Sirius XM, Channel 119 in Boston, 106.1, the Bay Area, Bloomberg 1130 here in New York. A touch of snow on the ground overnight in Manhattan, and, of course, 99.1 FM in Washington. We say good morning to all of you. The news flow, absolutely extraordinary. It really, as Washington begins its later morning than most of us, it'll be fascinating, Paul Sweeney, to see the news flow today. Paul, the market's a little soggy here. We're negative 18 futures, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. We have the S&P down 18, the Dow down 176. Let's figure out what's going on underneath the big indice numbers. We welcome Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at right here?
Well, one stock that's
not helping the market, let's put it that way, is Boeing shares down about 1% in early trading. The plane maker is considering a debt sale to raise cash after last year's grounding of the 737 MAX jet, according to the Wall Street Journal. The report cited people familiar with the matter. And the New York Times reported that Boeing has found more potential design flaws with the 737 MAX. So those stories not going over well. We're seeing some early weakness among technology companies as well. Apple notable in that regard. It's down 1%. The iPhone maker may delay the introduction of some 5G models of the smartphone until next January, according to Susquehanna. Now, this outlook was reported by Street Insider and Seeking Alpha.
Tom was just asking about, does he have to upgrade to the 5G? And I told him he does.
I can understand that. It really comes down to what AT&T and Verizon and everybody else does in terms of the networks, but that's another story for another day. No surprise, energy stocks higher in light of what's going on with oil prices. I mean, you saw crude move to $70 a barrel briefly in London trading. Occidental Petroleum certainly benefiting from that. It's up 1.5%. The energy producer said a pipeline unit acquired in a $37 billion takeover of Anadarko Petroleum will begin operating as a standalone company. We're talking about Western Midstream Partners, and Occidental said it plans to cut its stake in that unit to less than 50% this year. HP's up 1%, since we're talking deals. The Journal reported that Xerox Holdings has lined up $24 billion in financing for a proposed takeover of the computer and printer maker. But, I mentioned oil up. Not good news for the airlines. We're seeing losses as we did on Friday. American down 1.5%, Delta, Southwest, United all lower by about 1% in early trading. Square's down 1.5%. The payment processor was cut the equivalent of hold from buy at Wolfe Research. Dollar Tree lower by 1.5%. The dollar store chain was lower to sell from hold at Loop Capital. Data compiled by Bloomberg shows Loop is now the only firm to recommend selling Dollar Tree. Newmont Gold Corp's up 2.5%. The precious metal producer raised its quarterly dividend by 79% to 25 cents a share. Newmont also disclosed that it spent $506 million on stock buybacks in the fourth quarter, $1.4 billion for the year. A couple more for you. Smile Direct Club is up 9%. The maker of teeth aligners and braces will begin selling new dental products exclusively at Walmart. And Bed Bath & Beyond, talking retail, up 3%. The home furnishings chain raised more than $250 million by selling some property to Oak Street Real Estate Capital. Bed Bath & Beyond will lease back what it sold.
Interesting. David Wilson, thank you so much to get us started here on a Monday. Really the first business day of the new year is sort of how I would place this. Again, we're at Eurasia Group. Their top risks of 2020. Bloomberg surveillance this morning, and as always, throughout all we've done and into this new year, brought to you by Cohn Resnick, planning a transaction. Turn your tax strategy into a competitive advantage. To learn how, visit Cohn Resnick's Capital Markets Tax Resource Center at cohnresnick.com/tax insight. That's COHNREZNICK, cohnresnick.com/tax insight. Paul?
Yeah, Tom, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission on Monday proposed changes to auditor independence rules that would relax regulation of audit firms in cases involving affiliates of their clients and preparations for initial public offerings. Again, another sign of looser regulation for auditors. To get a sense of whether this is good or bad for investors and consumers, we welcome our good friend, Arthur Levitt, former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission and, of course, a member of the Bloomberg LP board as well. Arthur, thanks so much for joining us. I look back on some of the 2019 IPOs. There are definitely some issues about whether the auditors did a good enough job looking at conflicts of interest, related party transactions. I'm thinking particularly of WeWork. And now I see that the SEC is considering relaxing that relationship even more. What gives?
I think this is part of the deregulatory environment that's sweeping the country. It's almost inconceivable that this sort of change could have taken place at a different time. The notion of relaxing auditor regulations is something that can only occur during a deregulatory period such as we're in today. And I have a lot of reservations about the consequences of all of this, for instance, allowing the auditor to determine whether an item is material or not is just going a step too far, and changing the look-back period from 3 years to 1 year for U.S. companies, again, I think is easing up on rules and regulations that I think offered very important investor protections. And this can only occur during a period that we're going through now where rules and regulations are looked upon as being burdensome rather than being the basic protections for investors that they really are.
Yeah, it's interesting, Arthur. Back in my early days of investment business, one of the first, I think, really good tips I got was when reading an IPO prospectus, the first place to go is to related party transactions, because if there's any dirt on the company or any of the principals, it will be disclosed there. So to the extent that these rules are being loosened, is there a real risk here in your mind that investors could be put at risk of not getting protected enough?
In my judgment, the enactment of these rules would make investors less safe than they are without the enactment. I can't say it anymore.
Arthur, what's so important here, and I think a lot of our listeners understand your heritage of bringing individual protection and rights to global Wall Street another time. If we begin with the idea there's always an ebb and a flow, are you suggesting we're within the ebb and flow, or are we moving so much away from the protection of the investor that this is new territory?
Yes, I think the latter. I think we are. This is new territory. I think we are moving further away, which is part of the history of the era of deregulation. And I think we've moved a little bit too far, in my judgment, away from basic investor protections.
Arthur, in the time we got left with you, and, Paul and I got to go on here and talk about the markets and all that, I find it extraordinary yesterday how depressed the Keene household was that this may be the last game for one Thomas Brady of the New England Patriots. Should Brady play in another uniform, Arthur? I mean, isn't that borderline un-American?
Yes, it is. I was surprised to read that story and not see Bob Kraft saying Brady's here forever. Nobody's forever. As you see, Eli Manning sitting on the bench watching Jones take over the role that he's had for so many years. Brady and his team are bound at the hip, and I kind of it's against the football myth to see Brady playing for Cleveland.
Exactly. And what's interesting here, Arthur Levitt, thank you so much, former chairman of the Securities Exchange Commission, and of course, with the Bloomberg LP board. Paul, that primal scream you heard 3 time zones away was a gentleman in Newport Beach, California, I believe, celebrating that the Patriots were done in.
Exactly. I think a lot of people were celebrating the potential end of the Brady Belichick era, but it was shocking nonetheless. And I can tell you the TV networks are trying to figure out, is this good or bad for me going forward? So I think, it's, the New England Patriots, I think we're very good for television, so it's probably not a good thing.
Yeah, but Paul, let's rip up the script here. I'm not smart enough to go there. Let's do it. You're right. This is a big deal. I mean, New Orleans out, New England out. I mean, they're not getting who they want for the big soiree, are they?
No, but I'll tell you, the games have been fantastic. The ratings have been good, up year over year. So I think overall the NFL is very happy kind of with how this thing is playing out here. Yeah. And you're going to see it, Tom, I think in the next year or so, you're going to see the NFL, the networks, maybe some of these technology companies really start to begin to renegotiate these long-term contracts.
Interesting.
And that's going to be really interesting. You're going to see huge money trade hands, and you might see some new players come in, Tom. You might be streaming more football games onto your new 5G phone, which I know you're going to be first in line next year. My
new 5G phone. I'll be honest, folks, I didn't watch much of this yesterday, but I was with the injuries that the Philadelphia Eagles had. Paul, I thought Kevin Cerulli would come in at quarterback at any moment.
Exactly right. I'm sure it's not a good day for Kevin. But anyway, great weekend of football. Right now, let's go to Michael Barr for world and national headlines. Michael.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Tom. More than 3,000 service members are set to be deployed to the Middle East as tensions rise following the killing of an Iranian general by the U.S. That means thousands of families were separated from their loved ones, some without notice. This relative of a soldier stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina says her family is still coming to terms with his sudden deployment.
It's stressful for sure, especially with everything that has escalated recently. He was supposed to be only doing training, and now it has obviously transpired into something else. So we are making it through, though.
The head of Iran's Revolutionary Guards Quds Force, Qasem Soleimani, was killed Friday by a U.S. airstrike ordered by President Trump. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison says that hundreds of people have been airlifted out of areas where residents have been told it's too late to leave their homes from oncoming wildfires. Morrison says there are growing concerns about the mental health of Australians in hard-hit states.
Health support with medics, doctors, nurses and psychologists are ready to deploy into priority areas.
Morrison says the government is committing the equivalent of an extra $1.4 billion toward the recovery effort in addition to the sums already committed. Beginning today, U.S. tech companies that build artificial intelligence software face some new federal restrictions on exporting their products to China and elsewhere. The Commerce Department says they target emerging technology that could give the U.S. a significant military or intelligence advantage. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Tom.
Michael Barr, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate that. Again, like we had on Friday, some risk-off feel here. Right now, futures negative 16, Dow futures negative 170, the VIX 15.65. This is Bloomberg.
I was driving, trees went by, me and Del were singing.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
Sarah Vakjuri, founder and president of SVB Energy International, joins us now. Sarah, we've seen tensions between the US and Iran previously. They've usually had a pretty short-lived impact on the oil market. Does this feel like a longer-term issue for crude markets to you?
Exactly. I remember we had same discussion the first day that the market opened after the Saudi Aramco attack back in September, and we were discussing, and I mentioned that we don't think this is going to be a long-term or high-risk premium. The reason for that was that at that time, market was clearly understood the magnitude of the disruption in Saudi Arabia and had an approximate estimate of when Saudi production is going to be restored. Whereas this current tension that we're talking about is just the beginning of the game. No one is sure that what would be Iran's retaliation, what would be U.S. responses, and how things are going to affect each other. So what we think is that potentially what we call it Qasem Soleimani's risk premium on oil prices could be something that even could go even higher and stronger than the Saudi attack that we observed in September of last year, and for a longer term.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news.
What if your email let you see a project's entire history and not just the messages sent to you? What if everyone else on your team could see it as well? Then it wouldn't be email at all. Move communication from inboxes to channels in Slack. Instead of seeing a partial set of messages about a project, everyone in Slack sees exactly the same thing and moves work forward faster. Slack. Choose a better way to work. Get started at slack.com.
This ain't just lunch. It's the KFC fill-up lunch for $1.99. It's mighty fine. Tingles your spine, so jump in line because it's time to dine on a mini fillet burger, 2 hot wings and fries, all for a fist-pumping $1.99. What the... The KFC fill-up lunch every day until 3 p.m. At participating restaurants every day from 2nd to 26th of January until 3 p.m. only, subject to availability.
Hello, I'm here at the Race for Life Pretty Muddy with Great Britain's Jayanti Kaur. Jayanti, do you have a message for the millions tuned in at home?
What are you talking about? Millions of people aren't tuning in to witness me doing a muddy obstacle course.
Well, they absolutely should, Jayanti. You're a remarkable athlete.
I'm a geography teacher.
We're not athletes, we're cancer beaters. Sign up to Race for Life now and get 30% off entry until the 31st of January in partnership with Tesco.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff. Hey NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today. Don't want to miss a second of the NFL playoffs? Set reminders with TuneIn to stay in sync with the postseason. Just make sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search for your team on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when live coverage begins.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Cutting for the net, scores! Along the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
To see a bit of a double dip in earnings, in that earnings will weaken for the fourth quarter season in January and then the first quarter season in April, according to analyst expectations, but then recover very smartly into the second half of this year. It's always tough to get a real read on what's happening with core earnings when you focus on the bottom line, particularly when the swings are so great. So I do think part of the reason why second half earnings look so good is second half earnings 2019 were so bad. But if you look at the rate of revenue growth as some sort of a proxy for what's happening with core earnings, we've got revenue growing about 2-3% now, expected to accelerate a little bit over the course of the year. I'll be watching that top line really closely for a sign of the true trend.
Well, let's resurrect, Gina, you're too young for this, but let's resurrect a phrase from another time and place. Pricing power. Because if we're analyzing revenues, trying to figure out what we've got in 2020, it's about unit dynamics and also price dynamics. Are corporations in America getting pricing power, given all this so-called low inflation?
Well, it's really interesting you bring that up, because that was kind of one of the surprises of 2019 is analysts did get very nervous that companies were not going to be able to pass along price increases related to trade specifically. And the reality was that gross margins for S&P 500 companies were very, very stable and continued on an uptrend throughout 2019. The area that companies are having a difficult time with pricing really is reflected in operating margins. And it's not about pricing per se. It's not about them getting too high a cost that they can't pass on. It's more about the fact that they have to spend. They have to spend to sustain operations. They have to spend on new employees. The result is that operating margins have come under some degree of pressure. Then you have the added complication of tax reform, which created a lot of volatility for margins as well.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to say tax reform is one up, but you really bring up a really, really important point that I get in a lot of the mail that I see on so-called wage growth. If they go from the revenue line down to the operating income line, they're running into all sorts of expense problems. Where does that come from? I mean, if they have lower margins and a higher expenses or higher use of cash, does it come out of executive management compensation in return? What's it come out of?
Yeah, it's a great point. Some of it comes out of just cash. Corporate cash flow has been relatively strong despite the fact that you've had a bit of an earnings slowdown. Corporate cash levels are very high. I think it also, this statement that wages are growing very, very rapidly. The reality is that employment growth has been reasonably moderate over the course of the last couple of years, because where the companies cut more frequently is in employment as opposed to in, say, technology or capital spending, because they're forced to keep productivity levels extremely high. So, I think what's really happening broadly is there are a lot of tech companies that have to spend a whole lot of money on security. They have to spend a lot of money on infrastructure build. That's created a bit of pressure on margins. But, companies, I would think you'd really struggle to say companies are in dire straits here from a margin perspective.
Gina Martin Adams, thank you so much.
We got to pick this up when I get back to,
Yeah, it's interesting, Gina. Gina Martin-Adams, senior strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. Tom, I think making some good points here, which is the gains we saw in 2019, driven by multiple expansion in the market, more so than earnings growth. So if you're going to see another leg up in the equity markets in 2020, as Gina Martin-Adams was suggesting, you really have to have that driven by earnings growth. And as you've been talking about, Tom, you got to start at the top line of the income statement.
You got to start at the top line, but what was fascinating there, which is the tone that I get from our listeners, which is you can talk all you want, but where's the real job formation of quality jobs? And I'm getting hit over the head on that topic, Paul.
Yeah, we'll get some data, as you know, Tom, at the end of the month, some more data on the labor market. Still looking for growth, although growth slowing. What I'll be looking for is kind of the wages here. Can we break anything above the 3% type of growth we've seen in wages, over the last 12 months or so, given the historic low level of unemployment? This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city in the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that so in 10 years we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water? NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Rich is just a really, really, really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Futures point to a lower open with the opening bell straight ahead. Dow futures down 179 points. Crude oil is climbing up almost 1.4% and just under $64 a barrel. Investors continue to grapple with the fallout from a U.S. airstrike that killed an Iranian general. Your local Pier 1 import store may be closing. The distressed home furnishings chain, which announced 70 closures back in September, plans a significant increase in closures as it seeks to cut costs and turn around operations. We expect more details when Pier 1 reports its earnings this week. Bloomberg has also learned that bankruptcy is not out of the question. And dairy producer Borden has been producing milk since 1857. It will continue to do so for now, but will work on reorganizing the business after filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, the second major milk producer to do so in less than 2 months. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. Deep understanding in record time.
$2 billion, not exactly what they were going for.
They're going to be profitable.
Bloomberg Business Week, weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Hi, good morning. I'm Karen Moscow along with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney. And the opening bell is brought to you by SEI. Imagine your asset management firm's operational infrastructure as a competitive advantage. Let SEI show you how at SEIC.com/IMS. The S&P 500 is lower at the open, down 0.5%. Or down 0.6%. Make that down 19 points at 32.15. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.7% or 202 points at 28,434. And the Nasdaq's down 0.8% or 74 points at 89.46. The 10-year Treasury up 7/32, yield 1.76%. And the yield on the 2-year 1.52%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.7% or 43 cents at 63.48 a barrel. And COMEX gold is up 1.7% or $26 at 15.78.30 an ounce. The euro 1.1196 against the dollar, and the yen is at 108.09. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. And on that 108.09 call on yen, to review that, folks, that's the global litmus paper along with gold. Dollar yen, the relationship of the Japanese yen to the U.S. dollar. A bigger number is a weaker yen, 110, 109, 108. We've seen elements of a 107 yen over the last two tumultuous market days, and we see that now right on the cusp of a 108, fractionally a stronger yen this morning. This is a joy with Eurasia Group as we look at their top risks for 2020 is Midge Rahman, who over the last 2-3 years has been dead on of a very, very new and distinctive Europe. Midge, what is the distinction in your European report as you look at the top risks of 2020?
Thanks for having me, Tom. It's really, I think, a year where Europe is going to try to do more geopolitically. And that, I think, is a direct reflection of the fact Angela Merkel is weak at home, cobbled by a wobbly coalition, while Emmanuel Macron is sitting on top of a supermajority and a mandate that's probably going to see him win the next election in 2022. So Macron is decisively off this view that Europe should be doing more in the world, taking on China and its centralized political and economic model, dealing with the fact Trump is erratic, inconsistent, and cannot be relied upon. And in that space, I think a believer in the idea that Europe needs to be the defender of multilateralism and needs to speak up in world affairs.
Well, some of that is, and I've seen this so much in the last number of days, including all that's going on in Tehran and Baghdad, and that is the yearning look back to a Westphalian system. There's almost this nostalgia, Midge Rahman, of going back to what was. What do we want to go back to? Post-World War II or something even more distant like the Treaty of Westphalia?
I agree there is something historical and almost mystical about what the French are trying to achieve, and actually in practical and real terms, what can the European Union do to prevent escalation between this US and Iran crisis? And the answer at the moment is absolutely nothing. But I think it's that precise answer that's driving the French in particular to say, look, we need to be able to speak up in world affairs more effectively, and we need to be able to do more. And I think in the first instance, what the Europeans are going to try and do is leverage their market to give them a bigger voice in world affairs. So they're going to try to use the internal market to promote cross-border military trade, to promote more technological development within Europe, to make them less dependent on other parts of the world for defense and for the protection of their own interests. That's where I think they start with the market.
Hey, Midge, I find your comments about the EU trying to assert itself in global affairs extraordinarily interesting, just at a time when one of its most important members is leaving the bloc. How do you think the EU is going to deal with the UK and Brexit really over the coming weeks and coming months? I'm just kind of trying to get a sense of how hard or soft this whole thing may be.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, the European Union doesn't have a great strategic answer for the fact the UK is leaving. They're desperate to keep the UK in its diplomatic orbit. And I think the statement last night from Chancellor Merkel, French President Macron and Boris Johnson will go down well in Europe in the sense that Boris has firmly aligned himself, for now at least, with the EU camp in calling for de-escalation. And as you'll know, there was no reference to Trump in that statement. But in terms of pure Brexit negotiations, I think the landing zone looks quite hard because you have a government with Boris Johnson that basically wants to do things differently. Their interpretation of Brexit and the mandate they have is the right to do things differently. They don't want to follow EU rules in the future. They want to be free. They want to do things their own way. And that's going to immediately impact how close the two sides can indeed be, because ultimately market access for the UK depends on following EU rules. And if the UK no longer wants to do that because they want to be democratic and sovereign, well, that's going to have an impact on, I think, how close economically the two sides can be, which suggests there is a degree of risk for sterling, a degree of economic disruption that we're going to see manifest towards the end of the year when that becomes apparent to the investment community.
Hey, Mitch, just give us a sense of, in the city of London, in Parliament, what's the confidence level that the UK can actually negotiate a meaningful and positive trade agreement with both the EU and also the US? I mean, it's kind of going on live now between the US and China. These things aren't easy to do.
Yeah, I mean, you saw at the end of December when the government announced it was not going to extend the transition period. So basically, we're in a standstill transition now until the end of the year. The government said they're not going to extend that into 2021, and there was an immediate dip in sterling, something of a crash. I think markets are still working off the assumption that the government is going to soften its approach and that ultimately economic objectives will prove imperative and that will drive a closer relationship between the two sides. And I think that's misreading where this government is. I think they do, as I say, want to do things differently. That suggests negotiations are going to be complex, both with Europe, but also with the US. I mean, the price of a trade agreement with America is going to be difficult for this government because obviously the US is going to ask for things the government doesn't want to agree to, and that's going to be challenging, I think.
If you're just joining us, Midge Rahman with us. He is with Eurasia Group as we look at their top risks for 2020. Midge, in the last 48 hours, we've all had to become more expert on the collapse of a nuclear accord between the United States and Iran, and it's something that Europe has tried to triage almost through the recent months and even quarters. What does Europe want out of a nuclear redo with Iran? Do they go it alone with Iran? How will that work?
I mean, I think based on what's happened in the last 12 hours, Tom, I think honestly the likelihood that the Iran nuclear agreement now holds is, falling close to below zero. I think that was, the immediate objective and concern to the European Union last night, that Iran's going to now back out of the nuclear agreement. I think more broadly in the region, led by the French, there's a desire to stabilize Iraq and allow Iraq to be fully sovereign. And then, of course, a priority to attack Daesh and ISIS. I think that's absolutely top of mind, certainly in the Elysee and also in the Chancellery. That's how I'd argue the Europeans are thinking about their strategic objectives in the Middle East. But do they really have the means, the diplomacy, the politics to allow them to achieve those goals? I think I'm quite skeptical, frankly. We don't have an army. Foreign and defense policy is heavily uncoordinated in Europe. Capitals are basically doing their own thing. And that's why I think this is largely going to remain something in the American theater. I think US-Iran is a US-Iran issue. Europe will try and be relevant, but I think, frankly speaking, it's not going to be particularly effective.
It's just fascinating to me. So to be clear on this, Midge, does Europe have a voice in Tehran?
Not a loud one, not a very prominent one. I mean, if you think about the number of UK nationals that are being held hostage in Iran, and the amount of political capital that was invested by Jeremy Hunt, the previous Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson when he was Foreign Secretary and now as Prime Minister, and the Iranians are simply not moving. There's not that much the UK or indeed the European Union can do to get the Iranians to budge. So I think that's why, Tom, the French are so eager to redefine more broadly the European Union's place in the world. That's why Macron is intent on Europe being a geopolitical play, because he recognises the gap in his aspirations and where the EU is today.
So, Midge, do you think
But did they have this... I'm sorry, Paul, for interrupting. It's my fault.
No, good.
Midge, did they have a sense of isolationism like the president and like a good part of the people of America?
I mean, I think it's lesser felt, I think, to be honest, Tom. And again, it's the problem with Europe is structurally states are basically not coordinated in the area of foreign and security policy. It remains the prerogative of the member states, and the member states have competing objectives. I think Macron is of the view that real sovereignty for the EU is a function of a more stand-up army. They want to invest more on the military side. The Germans don't want to do that. The Germans want to dabble at the edges of defense policy, but not do much more. Certainly not get close to the 2% that the U.S. administration and Trump is asking for. So there are big competing strategic objectives within Europe about how it can achieve the sovereignty. The Macron team are asking for what is necessary in order to fulfill that objective, and there is no agreement. And that really, I think, always hamstrings the ability for Europe to be influential on the global stage.
Midge Rahman, thank you so much for joining us. Midge is the analyst at Eurasia Group covering all things Europe. And Tom, I think just a fascinating discussion from Midge, saying how, with the U.S. kind of pulling back in terms of globalism, the European Union is trying to figure out where they fit in the global stage. And there's even some disagreement, as Midge was mentioning, between kind of how France wants to frame the European Union, i.e. perhaps a little bit more aggressive than maybe where Germany wants to go. So even within the EU, there's certainly some distinction.
And I'm going to really, state, Paul, that this is off the radar of everyone in America, and I mean everyone, and that we're completely focused on China and the trade war. We all know the song and dance. But the bottom line is, Paul, is there's a whole nascent 2020 with Europe that could be not so much the same, but differently fractious.
Absolutely, Tom, and it'd be interesting to see post-Brexit, how does the European Union establish itself on the world stage? Right now, let's go to Michael Barr for world and national headlines. Michael.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Tom. With relations between the United States and Iran near a boiling point, the Department of Homeland Security has issued a bulletin after a top Iranian general was killed by a U.S. drone strike. It's warning of possible imminent attacks and cyber hacking by Iran. The blunt new bulletin was issued to law enforcement over the weekend. It states Iran and its partners have demonstrated the capability to conduct operations in the U.S. While no specific plot has been identified, the bulletin pointedly says, quote, an attack in the homeland may come with little or no warning. The bulletin also warns that homegrown radicals may try to take advantage of this tense moment. Former Democratic presidential candidate Julian Castro has endorsed Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren for president. Castro, in a statement, says Warren is the logical extension of his campaign's social justice-driven message, seeking to correct inequities through targeted policy proposals. The endorsement comes from the former housing secretary less than a month before the Iowa caucuses. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the government is committing the equivalent of an extra $1.4 billion toward the recovery effort in addition to the sums already committed. Morrison also says veterinarians have been dispatched to the Kangaroo Island to euthanize livestock and other animals apparently too burned to save.
The critical issue going forward will be the disposal of carcasses, which obviously presents very serious health issues as we've seen in other disasters.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg Poll.
Michael Barr, thank you so much. Well, Tom Keene and I have got the markets open for you. We are red on the screen. S&P down 10, Dow down 135, NASDAQ down 45 points. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Although there's still a long way to go regarding gender parity in Hollywood, we can start the year off with some good news. Women directed 11% of major films in 2019. That's a record high and more than double the total from the year before. And the trend will continue in 2020. 4 of the 5 most anticipated big-budget movies are directed by women or star female heroes. The shift suggests Hollywood is getting more aggressive about catering to women at the box office, where ticket-buying female filmgoers outnumber men in the U.S. Known as the Party of the Year, the Golden Globe Awards ceremony is going with a meatless menu for its 77th annual show. Guests will be served a 100% plant-based meal in a move that the Hollywood Foreign Press Association said is to raise environmental awareness about food consumption and waste. Stars will nosh on king oyster mushroom scallops along with a chilled beet soup. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Boredom, fitness enemy number 1. So don't just run. Run, run. Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up, lift. Mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run, mix it.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks are falling for a second session as rising tensions in the Middle East rattle investors. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is down 0.25% or 8 points at 3226. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.4% or 126 points at 28,509. And the Nasdaq's down 0.4% or 34 points at 89.86. 10-year Treasury up 6/32, yield 1.76%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.52%. NYMEX crude oil up 0.8% or 53 cents at 63.57 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1.5% or $23.30 at 15.7570 an ounce. The euro 1.1188 against the dollar. The yen is at 108.13. Bed Bath & Beyond, the home goods retailer, mired in a lengthy sales slump, rising after selling some real estate in a deal that generated net proceeds of more than $250 million. Shares are up 2.9%. Boeing is down 0.9% and reports the company is weighing a move to raise more debt following the grounding of its 737 MAX, and that the jetliner's return to service could face further complications. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen Moscow, thank you so much for that. We have Brent crude $69, $31 a barrel. That's up another 1% today on that Mideast tension. To get a sense of how this may play out in terms of global energy, we welcome Amy Myers-Jaffe. She's the David M. Rubenstein Senior Fellow for Energy and the Environment at the Council on Foreign Relations. She joins us on the phone. Amy, thanks so much for joining us. So again, quite a shock to financial markets, including commodity markets and oil. What is your sense of kind of how oil is going to play out here over the coming weeks and months?
Well, you have two things going on. One, we had this narrative that was holding the oil price down, which was that there wouldn't be a trade deal between the United States and China. So to the extent that we continue to hear positive things about a possible deal coming in a week, and if it actually comes to fruition, that's going to keep the short sellers at bay. And then the second step is what happens in the Middle East. One of the things that I think characterizes the market now is that every time we have these increasing geopolitical risks, the market becomes less resilient to the next event. So now I think the market has to worry about loss of Iraqi oil production to the market. And that could come about in one of two ways. We've already seen the very small Nasiriyah oil field go down for a day or two because the demonstrators. So we could see more disruptions in production that come about because of violence on the ground inside Iraq. Or if it turns out that the Trump administration, things don't go smoothly, we don't have a diplomatic solution, and tensions escalate, you could see the Trump administration taking a stronger position on whether there's oil smuggling between Iraq and Iran, and what of that oil production is being sold in the international market, and that could take some barrels off the market. And then, of course, the market is worried about what if there's a tremendous escalation, which hopefully we'll avoid, and it would engage with oil facilities, because as we all know from the history of the Iraq-Iran war, in that case, which was an extended war, the oil industries of both Iraq and Iran were completely destroyed over the course of the ongoing conflict.
So, Amy, do you believe that the primary risk to the global energy markets is direct attacks or retaliatory attacks on Mid-East refining production and that type of thing? Is that probably what is the most risk driver for global energy prices?
Well, I think there's also the possibility of sort of, just unrest in the country and it affects their oil industry. I think that's an additional risk. But the thing, I think the market probably will parse a distinction between, because you have the risk that the Iranian government will respond with direct attack on some kind of oil facility in a neighboring country. But you also have the risk now with the sort of calls for revenge for the death of Commander Soleimani, that you might have splinter groups that decide that they want to attack energy facilities in Iraq or elsewhere as part of their own, driver. And so you have sort of more of a terrorism risk that's probably higher today than it was a week ago. And then you have the overall risk, which I thought the market was undervaluing post the Abqaiq attack, that something would happen that would cause Iran to sponsor a second attack on energy facilities in the Gulf.
Amy, when in doubt, get out the map. And the bottom line is the Iranian oil reserves are concentrated at the northeast top of the Persian Gulf and up the river. And am I right that literally just over the river are the Iraq oil reserves? I mean, how easy is it for Iran to co-opt the Iraqi oil reserves if they choose to?
Well, I would say very easy. And I would say, in my opinion, that behind the scenes you're already seeing some of that help service the Iranian economy. Maybe not at scale, but I think part of the things that you see when you listen to the demonstrators that were calling for Iran to exit Iraq and calling for new political leaders that weren't so tied. Iraqi demonstrators calling for Iran to exit the country and to have its political leaders be less tied to Iran. I think that this sort of cozy relationship in oil swaps and things like that, we're part and parcel of that. And if you think about Iran and Iraq, and then you go back in history to 1990 when people had concerns that if Iraq somehow were to stay in Kuwait, they could threaten, use military force to threaten oil policy throughout the whole Gulf. We're in that same situation today, and you can imagine a nuclear Iran announcing that no shipping is going through the Strait of Hormuz, and that would be a much more complicated declaration than the current Iraq making that declaration.
Well, we got to leave it there. Amy Myers Jeffy, thank you so much. Just really, really love that. We greatly appreciate it today with the Council on Foreign Relations, the Rubenstein Senior Fellow. Paul, it's been an extraordinary, every year is extraordinary at Eurasia Group to talk to their different experts. But I'll tell you, Paul, this has been really something with the last 3 days news flow.
Tom, absolutely perfect timing for you and Bloomberg Surveillance to be at the Eurasia Group, really just kind of bringing all of the issues together coming out of the Middle East. It's a renewed focus for markets, for politicians, for strategists, and there are, the folks at the Eurasia are absolute top-notch.
Paul, I wasn't talking about the brain power and the international relations. I was talking about the donuts.
Exactly so. Exactly. So we'll see. But the Eurasia Group, always good friends of Bloomberg Surveillance, giving us insights, for all things political, geopolitical.
Paul Sweeney, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Tomorrow, folks, I'll be in Washington. A conversation with Alan Greenspan. Really looking forward to speaking to Chairman Greenspan, and of course on the Fed.
This ain't just lunch. It's the KFC fill-up lunch for $1.99. It's mighty fine. Tingles your spine, so jump in line because it's time to dine on a mini fillet burger, 2 hot wings and fries, all for a fist-pumping $1.99. What the... The KFC fill-up lunch every day until 3 p.m. at participating restaurants every day from 2nd to 26th of January until 3 p.m. only, subject to availability.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
NFL playoffs are here. Make sure you don't miss a minute of this year's postseason action by setting a reminder on TuneIn. Just make sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search for your team on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear and tap Notify Me. We'll send you an alert just in time for kickoff.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
And a move, and a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
This app and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Is there any bank right now in the U.S. that you think is a buy?
Do you think Chairman Powell has lost the market?
Jeff Bezos is no dope. What's the big ka-ching?
The big question, I think, for investors is free cash flow.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
The U.S. tariffs actually hurt both China and the U.S.
Large strategics are looking to either buy or invest in innovation.
Soybeans and corn have been basically at or below the cost of production for about 4 or 5 years.
What we see more bonds, more yield.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Monday morning from New York City to our worldwide audience. Geopolitical issues out of the Middle East continue to impact markets. We have red on the screen, risk off as investors discount what Mideast tensions mean for financial markets. Plus, we're also going to take a look at Boeing. Looks like that company is going back to the debt markets to raise capital as it still does not have that 737 MAX jet back in the air. But first, let's go to Karen Moscow, Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Karen.
All right, Paul, thank you. Stocks are falling for a second session as rising tensions in the Middle East rattle investors. The S&P 500 is down 0.3%, down 9 points at 32.25. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 0.5% or 130 points at 28,504. And the NASDAQ is down 0.3% or 27 points at 89.92. The 10-year Treasury up 5/30 seconds, yield 1.76%. Yield on the 2-year, 1.52%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.8% or 52 cents at $63.57 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1.5% or $23 to $15.7540 an ounce. The euro 1.1183 against the dollar, and the yen is at 108.13. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Lisa.
Thank you so much, Karen. Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, a top 100 national university in the latest U.S. News and World Report college rankings. Learn more at news.njit.edu. We are looking at a risk-off feel in markets, although, frankly, the mood really is resilience. It's sort of surprising that we're not seeing bigger declines given some of the escalation and rhetoric between the U.S. and Iran. Joining us here, Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor in our Interactive Broker studios. I'm trying to get a sense from you. Is it important that the markets came even more off their lows when we got that better than expected services data? Does it really all come down to, when does this really reach the U.S. economy? If it's going well, people are going to keep plowing into stocks.
I mean, that's sort of where you are at this point. I will tell you, though, that some of the commentary I'm seeing has a focus on oil prices because they could very well get in the way if what we've seen the last few months keeps going. It's not like we're kind of close to that point. I mean, you have Peter Bookvar over at Bleakley Advisory Group talking about $75 on crude as the level to watch because that would take you back to 2014 when we saw oil kind of fall out of bed and really stay there. And then you have the folks at Data Trek Research, Nick Colas, saying if you get to $95 a barrel, then hey, here comes the recession. So, there's a definite emphasis on what's happening in the oil markets, but it's not like we're really getting to the point yet, at least, where it's anything more than just sort of normal market fluctuations, at least by the standards of the last few years.
Interesting story out on the terminal about what this geopolitical risk out of the Middle East means for the Fed. And now it's raising the odds that there will be a Fed rate cut in 2020. The odds moved up, I guess, looking at the Fed fund futures market, now fully pricing in a 1/4 point cut by the end of 2020. Closer, I guess that's almost, they were looking at about 70% on Thursday. Now it's pretty much priced in.
Well, I mean, that's what happens when you get this focus on oil and what it may mean for the economy down the line if things keep going the way they are. I mean, let's face it, if you look back at the benchmark U.S. crude, West Texas Intermediate, you can see that it's up as much as 28% from its lows back in late August, or August at least. So, I mean, you've seen this sort of, rebound strength in the oil markets, but it's not like it's really sort of taken crude out of its range. And, the economy has done very well over that last, 5 years or so, even with oil prices fluctuating the way they have, because, they have been down from the peaks we saw, going back several years. So you can understand why there's the concern down the line about the Fed having to cut rates, because of what may happen to crude or whatever. But, we're not there yet.
When you start looking into the sector performance, are you seeing the strength in energy today that you would have expected? Because we really didn't, at least not in the large oil producers on Friday. What's going on today?
Not much, basically. I mean, you have the S&P 500 energy stocks higher as a group, but you're only talking about a gain of 0.4%.
Yeah, but hold on a second, because this is actually an interesting divergence from Friday, where you saw the shale players really gaining in terms of stock and bond price, but you didn't see necessarily the majors. Now you're seeing them, even the majors up, right?
A bit. I mean, it's certainly not beyond the pale in terms of the extent of the move. And, when you think about oil stocks, you have to bear in mind what's happening to the refiners. We saw them really take a hit on Friday because, let's face it, higher oil prices increase their costs. If they can't necessarily make it back by what's happening to the prices of oil products, think gasoline, heating oil, and so on, it's a concern. We're seeing more losses today in the group. Think Marathon Petroleum, Phillips 66, Valero Energy, Holly Frontier. So, it's something you have to keep in mind, in terms of assessing what's going on with energy stocks. There is a certain amount of back and forth within that group even.
Then there's just plain old news in the marketplace. Boeing reported coming back into the marketplace.
That was quite a transition, Paul.
Exactly. I mean, they're coming back into the market. I saw that was interesting that since they last issued debt in July, the bonds have been downgraded twice by the rating agencies. Yet their borrowing costs might be fairly similar to what they were back in July because the markets have rallied so much. But, it's just, I'm not sure. It just signals that Boeing may still not have a real handle on kind of the timing associated with getting all of these issues behind them.
True enough. And Boeing, even with those rating cuts, still investment grade. Yeah. So, they're able to benefit from what's going on in the bond markets. It's certainly working to their favor, no question, even as the company, deals with all the issues related to the 737 MAX. And it isn't just about cash flow. I mean, you had this report out of the New York Times over the weekend that they're finding other potential design issues with the 737 MAX, focusing, among other things, on the wiring in the plane's tail. So, even if they get the software straightened out that has been associated with those two fatal crashes that grounded the plane, it's not like they're necessarily out of the woods.
Yeah. Meanwhile, tech gonna keep rallying. Tech gonna do what tech do, right? That's right. Basically what we're seeing with Alphabet shares are reaching a new record high. Can we get a sense of what's behind that?
Well, Alphabet is kind of its own animal to some extent among the biggest tech companies. I say that shares tend to be less volatile than, the likes of Facebook or, Amazon or Apple. And actually, if you look at today's trading, Alphabet, you've got a lot of tech stocks that are falling. And you have to bear in mind, too, that, is part of the communications services area, lumped in with the phone companies and so on. Facebook's up a bit. So, it's a matter of them that gets to some extent, though. I will tell you, if you look at the hardware companies, Apple, the chip makers and so on, they've been lower in early trading.
Interesting. We did get an upgrade to buy from hold at Pivotal Research Group of Alphabet. They wrote that after a critical foundation year last year, the narrative continues to improve in 2020 and beyond, with Michael Levine, an analyst there, writing that he was encouraged by the durability of revenue growth, Paul.
Or I could just say he missed the 2019 move.
Whatever the case may
he
be,
missed
right
a
now,
monster move in the stock. Now he's trying to catch up.
Fair enough. Maybe he's trying to catch up, but that's one of the reasons why someone is attributing the rise. We're seeing a new record high on Google, and interesting that you're seeing gains of 1.7% on a day when almost everything else is down. Just saying.
Just saying. Exactly.
I'm just saying. No, honestly,
being a former director of research, there's a couple ways to look at it.
I know. I like this. You're actually coming in with a little more snark than usual. Usually you're more of a cheerleader.
Yes,
which I this is good. I like this. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks Editor. Thank you so much for being with us here in our Interactive Broker Studios. We are seeing weakness, but really not as much as we saw earlier, not as much as you would expect. Actually, all off their lows, with the Nasdaq and S&P down now just 0.3%. Right now, let's head to our 991 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager Hager there with World and National Headlines. Nathan.
Lisa, thank you, too. Top Democratic senators are calling on President Trump to declassify his rationale for targeting Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in a drone strike last week. In a letter to the White House, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and top Foreign Relations Democrat Bob Menendez said the classified notification to Congress isn't enough. This as European leaders scramble to mount their response to the U.S. action. Eurasia Group President Ian Bremmer tells Bloomberg Surveillance the president's unilateral action represents a shift in global power.
The U.S. does not need the Middle East as much as it did historically. The largest energy producer in the world, U.S. largest food producer in the world. U.S. technology companies are world champions. The allies are nowhere in all this. Americans spending a lot more on defense. The allies mostly are not.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel will travel to Moscow this weekend to discuss rising Middle East tensions with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Harvey Weinstein has arrived at a New York courtroom for the start of his trial on rape and sex assault charges. The disgraced movie mogul is using a walker now following recent back surgery. He's pleaded not guilty to charges of raping one woman in a Manhattan hotel room in 2013 and performing a forcible sex act on another woman in 2006. If convicted of the most serious charges, Weinstein faces a mandatory life sentence. Former Democratic presidential candidate Julian Castro is making an endorsement just days after dropping out of the 2020 race.
I'm proud to endorse Elizabeth Warren for president.
He made it in an online video saying he and Warren share a vision for big structural change. Warren has been lagging in the polls since her peak in early October. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Revisions, return policies. There are so many ways to redo a decision.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Do they have any path other than the courts?
Except here, we have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war. Are there winners?
So that you can too.
How does your modeling have to pivot to reflect a different scenario?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance?
Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the
Take the helm and ignite your spirit of adventure with a Sunsail holiday. Relax on a skippered yacht from sunny St. Lucia to the nutmeg-scented shores of Grenada. Or take charge with a bareboat charter along Dubrovnik's glittering coastline. With up to 20% off selected destinations, now is the time to book your Sunsail adventure. Sunsail. See the world differently.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night, and somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here, testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use, and the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
At TradePoint, we get just how busy you are. That's why we have a handy range of services to make your life easier. Whether it's cutting timber, matching bricks, or mixing paint, We help you make big jobs smaller. So for all you need, when you need it, get to TradePoint. Restrictions may apply. See tradepoint.co.uk.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
NFL playoffs are here. Make sure you don't miss a minute of this year's postseason action by setting a reminder on TuneIn. Just make sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search for your team on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear and tap Notify Me. We'll send you an alert just in time for kickoff.
Lines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are down for a second session as rising tensions in the Middle East seem to be upsetting investors. The dollar is down and treasuries are up. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 0.2%, down 7. The Dow's down 0.4%, down 125. And the NASDAQ is down 0.2%, down 17. The 10-year is up 430 seconds, the yield 1.77%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 0.7% at 63.47 a barrel, with COMEX gold up 1.5% at 15.7550 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 108.13. The euro is $1.1185. The British pound $1.3146. Boeing has suffered 2 ratings downgrades since it last issued debt in July, yet any increase in borrowing costs for the embattled plane maker may be negligible because credit markets have rallied. Right now, Boeing is down 1.2%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the 6th straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit Commonwealth.com to learn more. The big question in markets today really is, at what point does the disruption that we're seeing with the U.S. And the Middle East, in particular Iran, at what point does that bleed into U.S. economic growth and start to really change investing outlooks going forward? At least that's the financial question. Let's specify that. Joining us right now, we're really lucky to have Frank Rubinski. He's Chief Macro Strategist at Aegon Asset Management. Frank, from your perspective, what's the answer? When do you start to actually change allocations in response to the unrest?
Sure. I think you have to see a real sustained
negative drag here from some kind of military conflict. I mean, just look over history. There's been lots of military conflicts, and it's kind of background noise. But when does the noise become more than just noise, right? When does it start? When do the dominoes start falling? We don't think we're there yet. That said, we do have a backdrop where it's late cycle for the economy. So, if that's our starting point, we've been much less, risk on to say, just given that you see these potential downsides to the economic outlook. But again, just to your question, I think you really need to see some kind of sustained push here, as opposed to, before you really start drastically putting on the, safety bid for treasuries where you're, in the low ones or something like that.
Well, one byproduct that we've seen just in the Fed futures market over the last several days is increasing odds that perhaps the Fed will cut rates in 2020, just in the last, again, couple of days. How do you view that?
Well, we say, so our forecast is that there's a good probability to get 2 cuts this year. That's what we had coming in before we even had these geopolitical things flaring up. We still think 1 cut is pretty certain. We think the second cut is, a coin flip. But so we've been on that trade, but more from an economic side, we think this downside skew that could manifest itself from the geopolitical side would kind of add to the market shifting more towards where we currently are.
I'm struggling to understand what has to happen to make that come to pass. Right now, we're seeing 1 rate cut by the end of the year priced into markets. Beyond that, not seeing a lot of calls for that unless we get closer to a recession, which doesn't seem to be anywhere near the economic data, right?
Right. That's why we say, 1, it's a coin flip. It isn't like we have it, it's 100% certainty. But I agree. I mean, we think when you look at the macro outlook, we're coming off of peak cycle growth. We view it as a kind of a 2% minus year, kind of a trend growth, which isn't bad. But you look at the distribution around that. How do we get the 2.5-3% growth of the previous years? Well, especially in the late cycle, we had to have a tax cut, right? A pretty substantial size. So we had to have this big fiscal push. To get that now, I don't see a tax cut or something like that coming through to really kind of propel this late cycle environment. So you look at, but then you have the geopolitical side. So you look at the distribution around our kind of base case forecast. And if the geopolitical, we haven't even talked about trade because now the Middle East has kind of taken over the headlines. But trade is this ongoing soap opera that we don't think is going to go away anytime soon. And it's not just U.S.-China, it's U.S.-Europe, and there's multi-front from a trade side. You also have a political cycle coming up later this year. And look at the stark contrast in candidates, right? I mean, it's instead of this kind of center left, center right, it's more of kind of a camel's back where it's extreme sides, right? And if one party brought in a tax cut a couple of years ago, and you already have the other party saying we're going to try to reverse that, what does that do to corporate activity, right? So we think the downside, the skew is negative on our kind of a base case forecast. And you look at like the ISM we had, last week. I mean, not too encouraging of people that are in the camp that, the slowdown last year in industrials is very similar to 2012, 2016. Well, bear in mind, those were early and mid-cycle, right? We're in a different environment today than we were, back then. So I would just kind of caution people that are making that kind of same mini-cycle call, this time around.
Last year, I had a great year with my Treasury's total return. This year...
Congratulations.
Thank you. Am I just going to clip coupons this year?
So we're underweight sovereigns, treasuries. We think it's a coupon clip, unless, the bull case scenario is obviously the geopolitical component gets so bad, right, that as I said before, you're going down to the low ones. But you also, if the economy kind of holds, if the geopolitical side kind of simmers down, the trade soap opera, you get a couple weeks of some positive data, you could easily back up. We tried to kind of take a run at the 2% handle, which would, when your yields are that low, it could quickly eat away your whole year. So we think treasuries, you had such a great run. You cut the yield in half, right? So it was to your point, great play last year. But from here, it's at best kind of a coupon clip.
How about bonds backed by the tunnel between the New Jersey and New York? No, I'm just kidding. Or how about muni bonds? I am curious, though, just real quick here, 30 seconds. What's your highest conviction call for 2020?
We continue to like mid-tier credit. We think, in a slowing nominal growth environment where margins are pressured, you don't want to be over-levered to the higher risk, part of the space where you need, that earnings growth to grow into your balance sheet. Again, as we talked about, you don't want to be too far high end because that's where you've already had a huge run, and the duration play is a little hard to play here. So we think mid-tier credit is where you can maximize your risk-adjusted returns.
Frank Rubinski, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you playing hurt here. You come in, you got an arm and a sling, you make the trip up from Baltimore. We appreciate that.
Any exciting story?
Unfortunately not.
No, he's just getting old. Wear and tear, he said. Frank Rubinski, Chief Macro Strategist, Aegon USA Asset Management, based in Baltimore, but joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio.
I feel like you have to come up or just make up a story.
Yeah.
You got to.
Yes, parachuting.
We'll help. Yeah, you're skydiving. Yeah, definitely. Parachuting off and skiing.
Yes.
We'll manufacture it for you.
Exactly right. Looking at the market right here, we have the market, just a little bit, again, off about 5 on the S&P, but off the lows. That's probably the most important thing, the resiliency we're seeing in financial markets once again. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks dropping as investors continue to deal with the fallout from the airstrike that killed a powerful Iranian general. The sudden escalation of tensions in the Middle East continues to weigh on the enthusiasm that sent the S&P 500 to a record on its first trading day of the year. Pier 1 Imports is planning a significant increase in store closings as the home furnishings chain looks to turn around operations. The company is said to announce the new round of shutdowns when it reports earnings next week. Borden Dairy has become the second major milk producer to file for bankruptcy recently. Rising milk prices and other challenges made Borden's debt load unsustainable. Less than 2 months ago, rival Dean Foods filed for Chapter 11. And Frozen 2 has become the highest-grossing animated film ever, while Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker was this weekend's top draw. The Rise of Skywalker brought in $33.7 million this weekend in domestic theaters, according to researcher ComScore. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Mix it up, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time, skip, mix it up, run, mix it up. Add a boxing class, skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
At TradePoint, we get just how busy you are. That's why with a handy range of services to make your life easier. Whether it's cutting timber, matching bricks, or mixing paint, we help you make big jobs smaller. So for all you need, when you need it, get to TradePoint. Restrictions may apply. See tradepoint.co.uk.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
NFL playoffs are here. Make sure you don't miss a minute of this year's postseason action by setting a reminder on TuneIn. Just make sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search for your team on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear and tap Notify Me. We'll send you an alert just in time for kickoff.
Start hearing more of what you want. Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, Boeing shares lower by more than 1.3% today after announcing that they are going to probably go back to the debt market for more money, even after coming as recently as July. Plus, we'll speak with Phil Orlando of Federated Investors. Right now, though, let's head to Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Lisa, the S&P's 2-day slide actually hit 1.1% at one point amid the ongoing fallout from the U.S. airstrike that killed a powerful Iranian general, but has indeed come a long way back. Tech companies, which had led the push to recent records, did pace the losses. European shares have also declined along with Asian benchmarks. James Bevan, CCLA Investment Management, tells Bloomberg he's more concerned about U.S.-China trade than any after effects of the U.S.-Iran tensions on markets.
Unless we see the development into a hot war that engulfs the Middle East, and I would put a low probability on that outcome, simply because Iran now knows absolutely that the U.S. has resolve, and it absolutely knows it has military capability.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P is now down 0.2%, down 5. The Dow is down 0.4%, down 127, and the Nasdaq is down 0.1%, down 9. The 10-year is up 1/32 with a yield of 1.78%. West Texas Intermediate's up 0.6% at 63.42 a barrel, while COMEX Gold's up over 1% at 15.6830 an ounce. The dollar yen 108.20, the euro $1.1188, the British pound $1.3149. Apple's price target has been raised to $350 from $280 at Needham, which wrote that the iPhone maker had a number of tailwinds in 2020. Right now, Apple is down 0.1%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's 10:33 on Wall Street. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Brooke Sullivan. She covers deals and industrials for Bloomberg Opinion. She joins us here on our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. And Dow Jones is reporting this morning that Boeing may be going back to the debt markets. They just tapped the debt markets, I guess, previously in July. I guess to me, this suggests that perhaps this Boeing 737 MAX issue may take longer than maybe even expected to get resolved. Let's get a sense, Brooke. How surprising is this if Boeing does come back to the debt markets? What does that kind of tell you in the market?
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is that so they did get their credit rating cut by both Moody's and S&P towards the end of the year, but their bonds are not trading as if they did. They're trading as if Boeing has a much higher credit rating, and so I think there's a certain sense of why not raise more money. Interest rates are so low, and they're not necessarily being punished by arguably even equity investors for the MAX crisis. Like you would think with a company facing such a catastrophic event like this that the stock would be down a lot more than it actually is. And so I do think that's part of it. But to your point, this is obviously dragged on a lot longer than Boeing or really anybody else expected. And so that necessarily entails a significantly higher cost. There's simply the upfront cost of maintaining these airplanes that are in storage. There's the cost of customer compensation, which is likely to have significantly increased from Boeing's last estimate in July. Then they were targeting about $6 billion. Now, obviously, airlines did not have the planes through the busy holiday season. They still don't have them. And so I would expect that number to tick up. And then there's also, the possibility of an accounting charge, just given that the plane has remained grounded and they've also had to halt production.
So just to your point, I'm looking right now at Boeing bonds that are trading today, and they are trading lower, price down, yields higher, but not by that much. And I'm wondering, do we have a sense of why, of what investors are looking at that gives them confidence that even though Boeing faces all these unknowns and even though they are looking to get more money to sort of plug the holes of those unknowns, everything's copacetic?
So they are sitting on a decent amount of cash. I think they have about $20 billion, so they can cover the expenses. And so I think that's why there is some, I don't know if you want to call it complacency with the prospect of issuing more debt. But I also think, the fundamental issue is that Boeing is in a duopoly. It's essentially Boeing and Airbus. Boeing, one reason why they've been issuing debt is because they're buying Embraer's commercial jet business, as long as European regulators give that the green light. But that will essentially remove one of the few remaining competitors to Boeing and Airbus. And so when you're in a duopoly, even when you experience, a catastrophic crisis like the MAX, there's only so much damage that can be done. You're not going to see airlines categorically shift their orders over to Airbus. For one, Airbus doesn't have space for them. They have about 6 years of backlog. And so if you wanted to switch those orders over to Airbus, you'd have to get in the back of the line. And also, they don't want to do that because that just gives so much pricing power to Airbus. And so, one of the things that I think has been rather mind-boggling about this is that you haven't necessarily seen the reaction to Boeing as you've seen in other corporate crises. Like I think of Wells Fargo and the levels of outrage there, and it's been relatively contained. Now, I don't think that's healthy, and I do think that down the road, you should see Congress looking at Boeing potentially from an antitrust perspective. You just look at how much dominance it has in the aerospace industry, and specifically if you think about its past push to sort of take over more service suppliers and parts makers, that specifically should get a lot more scrutiny.
Is there any best guess out there in the marketplace when this thing could get back in the air? I know there's a new CEO. It's only been there a few weeks, but is there any guess now?
So the reporting has regulators looking at maybe a March return. And there was a report from the New York Times over the weekend that talked about international regulators planning a trip to the U.S. to test out that new software, which signals that they do feel like we're getting to a point, at least, where it's worth them taking a look at it, and potentially a certification flight happening in the U.S. this month. Those would all be very positive developments that would keep us on track for a spring return. But I think what we've learned from this crisis is that nothing is predictable. Now, when I talked about that potential accounting charge for Boeing, for the purposes of determining that, it does have to come up with a timeline for the MAX's return. So whether they issue bonds or when we get their earnings in a few weeks, they will have to put another timeline on this for accounting purposes, so that can be a good indication.
Brooke, just real quick here, we're talking still about the MAX 737 jet. We're not talking about the fact that there could be potentially war in the Middle East, that higher oil prices are going to affect demand in terms, or the cost of flying airplanes, as well as the demand for travel. How does that factor in?
So on the one hand, it could help Boeing's defense business, but as you said, on the commercial side, it risks being a perfect storm for the airlines because fuel is their second biggest cost. Their first biggest cost is labor, and most of the major U.S. airlines are renegotiating pilot contracts in 2020, and they're likely to see a significant uptick in expenses there given how tight the job market is. But then you also, the way you counteract those rising costs is that you raise ticket prices. They can't do that because you will have the MAX returning eventually, and that will unleash a significant amount of capacity into the market. And so you do risk seeing, potentially a decrease in demand in commercial aviation, which would be a huge turning point because that's been such a strong market for so long.
That means we get to talk about this for a lot more time.
I'll be back.
So You'll be back. Brooke Sutherland, thank you so much. We always appreciate and find your insights tremendously helpful. Brooke Sutherland is a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion covering everything. Coming up, we're going to be speaking about the markets, in particular, the resilience that we're seeing today as you're looking at the NASDAQ almost positive at this point. Right now, though, let's head over to our own Nathan Hager in our 99.1 studios. Nathan.
All right, Lisa, thank you. Thousands have flooded the streets of Tehran to mourn Iranian Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei openly wept for the general during a funeral procession that's rivaling the turnout following the death of the Islamic Republic's founder, Ayatollah Khomeini, 30 years ago. Meantime, Senate Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer and Bob Menendez are calling on President Trump to declassify his reasons for targeting the general in a drone strike in Baghdad last week. Tom Donilon served as national security advisor to then-President Barack Obama. He tells Bloomberg Surveillance the lack of coordination with Congress raises a question.
What's the strategy here? There really hasn't been kind of a full explanation of what the president's approach is in the Middle East in general and what the approach is going forward here with respect to Iran.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says her chamber will pass a war powers resolution this week limiting the president's actions in Iran. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison is promising to pay whatever it takes to recover from his country's devastating bushfires. Morrison says his government's committing an extra $2 billion Australian dollars on top of the tens of millions already promised.
Health support with medics, doctors, nurses and psychologists are ready to deploy into priority areas.
At least 25 people have been killed, 2,000 homes destroyed in the bushfires. A 9-year-old girl is among the 5 people killed in a massive pileup over the weekend on the Pennsylvania Turnpike that left at least 60 others hurt. A loaded bus lost control, sparking a chain reaction crash that involved 3 tractor trailers and another car. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEI.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run, run, mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run, mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown to Kansas.
Search NFL today.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the with live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium,
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that the 5 top Democrats.
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
On the goal line, Martin scores and takes it home.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Petrangelo.
The action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move and a shot.
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily. in.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and Quick Take by Bloomberg. Is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks go from in the red to little changed as reaction to the Iranian situation appears to be on the wane. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is now little change, down less than 1. The Dow is down 0.3%, down 83, and the Nasdaq is up 0.1%. 10. The 10-year is little change with a yield of 1.78%. West Texas Intermediate crude is in the green, but not as far as it had been. It's up 0.4% at 63.28 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 8%, 64.10 per ounce. The dollar yen 108.32. The euro's $1.1185, and the British pound $1.31.49. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, the rhetoric between the U.S. and Iran is getting increasingly heated, but you wouldn't know it if you took a look at equities. Actually, on the day, the Nasdaq has now turned marginally positive, up 0.9 of a percentage point, and you're seeing the S&P just barely negative, which raises a question: how is it that traders seem to be completely complacent to the idea of an escalating conflict in what has been described as a tinderbox of the Middle East? Joining us now is Phil Orlando, Chief Equity Market Strategist and Head of Client Portfolio. portfolio management at Federated Investors, which oversees more than $80 billion in equities, and joins us here in our Interactive Broker studio. So, Phil, does that concern you, the complacency?
So the Dow Jones was down 300 points or so on Friday, and I think that was appropriate. And then waking up this morning, the futures at 5 a.m., we were down another couple hundred points. And I think what's happened over the course of the last few hours